Today we're going to be talking about the top 10 tips on how to play smooth bow changes on the violin. And I've got a bonus tip for you, an 11th tip that comes from my karate training. Are you ready for this? It's violin time. Hey, I'm Lynn Kuo. I'm the founder of Violin with Dr. Lynn. I coach motivated violinists how to master their instrument and become more fearless on stage. We are digging in today into how to play smooth bow changes on the violin, in particularly at the frog. There are a lot of discussions on how to play smooth bow changes at the frog that include figure 8 patterns and flicking of the wrist and absolutely doing nothing at all. So we're going to be debunking a few of these common mistakes and common practices and figuring them out through the 10 tips that I have for you today. So one of the most common mistakes that I see, and I know about this mistake because I've done it myself, is trying to do too much with the wrist. There's a misconception that getting a smooth bow change at the frog requires a movement and flexion of the wrist. Unfortunately, what this produces is a bump in the sound, a hiccup. There's also a misconception that we need to be extremely flexible and active in the fingers. Unfortunately, when you do too much, it does not create a smooth bow change. Tip number 1 is to think about the larger muscles. So the fingers, the wrist, all these are small joints, and around these joints are muscles. What I do is to think about bigger muscles. So I'm thinking about the bicep, tricep area, the upper arm. And in fact, I go all the way to the back. So if I'm thinking about the back, my arm begins at the back. As you can see, there's not much happening in the wrist and the fingers because I am putting my focus on the back. Tip number 2. Similar to thinking about the back, what I do is I think about an imaginary air balloon underneath my armpit. When I imagine this large, light balloon under my armpit, all of a sudden my arm feels like it's floating. And that also prevents too much motion in the wrist. My tip number 3, this one's a fun one. I imagine that there is a large, giant bungee cord attached to the back of my hand, suspended up from above me. When I think of that bungee cord, I feel as if my arm is suspended and bouncy. And all of a sudden, it's easier to change the bow at the frog. So if the other tips didn't work, you can try that one. Tip number 4 that I have is called what I call the silent helper. If the previous tips didn't work, sometimes I picture that there's a silent helper pushing my arm from behind my elbow, from the end of my tricep. It's pushing my arm for me. And that helped me get up to the frog with ease and effortlessness and lightness. So in combination with silent helper and this bungee cord lifting my bow, my bow changes are getting smoother. Tip number 5, keep your hand passive. So as I mentioned before, the common mistake is to do too much with the fingers and too much with the wrist. Think of the hand being very, very passive, almost as if it's a little kitten, and a mama kitten is holding the little kitten from the neck. So this little kitten is limp, not doing anything but just hanging out. Keep the hand passive. Right, tip number 6, keep the bow flowing. So sometimes you will hear people saying to increase the bow speed at the frog to make sure that the bow changes smoothly. This is not incorrect, but I prefer to think of it as keeping the bow flowing, not necessarily speeding up. So I do have to keep the bow flowing, so I give it a little bit of poof of air. It's not an intentional speeding up per se. It's my intent to keep the bow flowing as if it's a continual flow of air, an air current. If this is an air current, it reverses. You want the airflow to continue flowing. Tip number 7 on how to make smooth bow changes is to imagine that you have more bow at the end of the frog. Go past the frog as if there's more bow. So you can simulate that by holding the bow a little higher. If you're going to go up bow, you're going past what you normally would on an up bow to a down bow. Once you start practicing a few of those, you get the sensation of lifting your arm a little higher, as if it's suspended. Remember the bungee cord? The bungee cord feeling of going past or going higher? This simulation will help you move flowing. Remember the word flow in the previous tip? It will help you flow the bow upward. And it'll be easier to then change the bow on the down bow. So flowing up, going past your imaginary frog, and then it reverses. So let me demonstrate. Imagining more bow. And you see how I actually get further down all the way to the ferrule. Tip number 8 on how to make smoother bow changes is I imagine that my bow arm is like a paintbrush. The arm is the handle of the brush, a very long handle, and the fingers are the passive bristles on your paintbrush. So you are never painting with just bristles. You're painting with the arm of your paintbrush, and the fingers are passive. So we're combining all of these tips together. The paintbrush is controlled by the handle. The bristles react to the handle's movements. Smooth bow changes. Tip number 9 on smooth bow changes is to make sure that you keep the bow straight. People sometimes will take a figure 8 approach. Somehow, I think this could work if you do it well, but there's a danger of doing so much that you lose your sound. You can hear that my sound is suffering. So I do an intentional straight bow. I make sure by looking at the angle of the hair on my bow stick and the string and making sure that's perpendicular, a perfect right angle cross. Pretending it's flowing and keeping the hand passive, and also imagining the bungee cord and the air balloon. Tip number 10 on smooth bow changes. You can imagine also that the whole bow and the bow arm are one giant, massive, gigantic pendulum that moves quite slowly and has a big arc, so that the up bow is one big swing, and then it reverses direction. And it reverses direction again. It swings up, and then it just reverses. So you can imagine a pendulum. All right, so now we get to the bonus tip on how to make smooth bow changes. And this tip comes from my karate training and also my Pilates training. So my tip for smooth bow changes is to remember to breathe. So many times when I get stuck at the frog, it's because I've stopped breathing. When I stop breathing, it's hard to make that air flow. The bow is your air. If you were a singer, you would use air. If you're a wind player, you would use air. Well, the string player has a bow, and the bow is the equivalent of a wind player's air. We need to actually consciously breathe. So when I get to the frog, this is my chance to exhale. As soon as I have anything difficult, in fact, I make sure that I exhale some flow of air, but also to release muscular tension. It's a really handy trick. In fact, people use it when they go get their shots in their arm in vaccine time. This is the time of vaccine. Do you ever notice that when someone gives you a vaccine, they ask you to take a breath and they put the needle in? Like magic. You don't even feel it. It's the same concept. Somehow the bow change works like magic. All right, so those are my 10 tips on smooth bow changes, including a bonus 11th tip. If you liked this tutorial, if any of these tips helped you, let me know. Put your favorite tip in the comments below. Like the video, subscribe to my channel. If you do, I will be so happy. And I have an upcoming video coming here on Ricochet. Stay tuned for Ricochet in 5 steps. And also, if you want to know how to practice more efficiently and save time in the practice room and learn music faster, check out my free guide, How to Practice Like a Ninja. It's down in the description box below. I hope you have a great day. See you in the next video.